Hi, I'm Christopher Carey, and this is the final tutorial in a series of tutorials covering the techniques I use for coloring light flesh tones. In this lesson, I'll be laying in the final values for her hair and applying textures and highlights to her face. The techniques I'm using to color her hair are the same in principle as the techniques I've used throughout the series. My approach is simple. I lay in my initial colors and values in a rough and textural fashion, then smooth them out with lighter, stronger colors. For this final pass on her hair, I'll alternate between colors and values, coloring and then smoothing and then coloring again. At this stage, I let the work I've done previously guide my choices with regard to color and placement. In this final pass on her hair, I'll use the traditional value coloring method. I'll begin with a V09, which is a very dark, pure purple. I lay this color in with thick strokes at the base of the hair forms and pull the stroke to a point at the end of each mark by pressing harder at the beginning of each stroke and lifting off at the end. I will soften and blend the V09 with a lighter V06. In addition to being lighter, the V06 is also considerably warmer than the V09. As discussed in a previous tutorial, any color can be considered warm or cool, depending on the color it sits next to. In this case, the darker V09 has a larger proportion of blue in its color formula than the V06, which makes the 06 appear much warmer than it would if applied to white paper with no other colors around it. This is an important concept to remember, especially if you're in the habit of making color swatches of your Copic colors to determine how they will look in a drawing. In actual practice, independent color swatches can only tell you how a color works in isolation against a white background. The moment you place any color next to any other color, the two colors act upon each other visually, and both colors are changed. A perfect example of how two or more colors placed side by side can interact visually to create a different color impression than either color in isolation can be seen in the painting titled A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of the Legrand by Georges Seurat. In this work, none of the secondary colors are mixtures. The greens that you see were created by placing tiny dots of pure yellow and blue of the same value side by side. The two colors are mixed optically by the brain to create the color green. In theory, there is no green or orange in this painting at all, at least not in the physical sense. This transmutation of color is visible in everything we see and can be used to place colors in areas you might not think they belong. If this drawing were an actual three-dimensional sculpture, the light falling on her hair would bounce off in all directions and carry some of the purple color with it onto any object nearby. In simple terms, that means that because her hair is purple, there needs to be some purple in her face. So here, I am using a V12 to indicate the shadows on her nose and eye sockets, and to relate the color of her hair to her face. In the same way that colors are related, and should be carried from one area of the drawing to another, a professional artist should relate the various media they use in each area of the drawing. Because I've used heavy black lines on the contours and facial features, it's important that I use at least some degree of line work inside her hair as well. All good drawings are built around a few basic technical concepts that are then used repeatedly, but with variety, throughout the entire work. It is the variety of a few basic techniques that brings unity to a drawing and makes every part work together as a whole. With the final colors and line work in her hair complete, I can begin to apply highlights and textures to her face. These are the finishing touches to this area of the drawing, and will bring this tutorial series to a close. For highlighting, I use an opaque white gouache made by M. Graham. I prefer this white over other whites because of its versatility. Because it is a water-based pigment, I can apply it straight from the tube with a brush, or thin it with water and apply it in a less concentrated form. I can also modify or completely remove it once it's dried by dissolving it and lifting it away with a cotton swab dipped in water. My approach to applying highlights is not based in any way on the implied light source in the drawing. I'm not at all concerned with making my highlights consistent with the light source, since in this drawing, the light is soft and diffused, and not casting any strong shadows on the forms. Instead, I apply my highlights specifically to accentuate the underlying forms and to show them off to their best advantage. This approach allows me to place highlights wherever I think they will improve the overall look of the work. It also helps to make the skin look supple and shiny, and brings an added sense of life to the drawing. With my highlights applied, I can now bring her face to completion. Taking my cue from the Seurat painting we examined earlier, I will place dots of various colors into the areas of flesh tone. These points of color serve several different purposes. By understanding that the brain blends colors visually, I can apply any color that I've already used in her face or hair, so long as I keep the values of those colors consistent with the overall value of her skin. I won't use any color that is darker than her skin, since they would not visually blend in. These dots of color add texture to the skin and a visual variety that is pleasing to the eye, and help to make the flesh tone more believable. With my textures applied, her face and hair are more or less complete, and now that I'm certain that the most important part of the drawing works well, I can turn my attention to completing the rest of the work. As the rest of the drawing comes near to completion, I will make small color additions to her face and hair to ensure that every part of the drawing works together to create a unified work, where every element is related by color and technique.